Hey, Indigo, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
All right, it's great to see you. I was introduced to Indigo Avisov through Bill Carmody, who was a previous guest. And then in the ever unfolding small worldness of it all, it turns out that Indigo is also a friend of Kelly Campbell, who was my first guest on the podcast and raved about Indigo. And I knew for all of those reasons that I was really excited about having you here today on the podcast. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. And as it always ends up being, that the world is quite small and the paths that converge are, I find, always meaning to. Shout out to Bill. And I'm grateful for the introduction. And it's been so lovely to get to know you.
Same here. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
In speaking with Indigo, I learned that their hope is that each person sees the power that's unique to them, which creates space for a world where there's no scarcity and where we're all additive to the web of life, which is beautiful. It reminded me, as they said that, of my absolute favorite quote on the planet, which is Oscar Wilde, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken," plastered all over my website as well. So I knew that there was a kinship immediately. Indigo spent 18 years in the tech sector to date, starting as a tech support rep at an Apple store, correct?
hmm That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And now works as the global diversity, inclusion, and belonging leader at Uber. Work in the world is expanding. They're working as a purpose coach, doing spiritual, nature-based shamanic healing. And in the time that I've had the opportunity to get to know Indigo, that word spiritual does feel very central to me in my experience of them. The depth and groundedness, also this deep interconnection and connection to life outside of all of us. So spirituality seems right in the wheelhouse of everything I've gotten to know them for. And I'm just super excited to have the chance to spend more time. Welcome again.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
what an intro. God. I feel super honored to receive that. And as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, spiritually grounded feels like the right terminology. And also, it's cool that that can look so different for everybody. Spiritual doesn't have to look a specific way. And I have this friend, Roxanne, who always tells me that it can look super different for everybody. And I actually really love that.
That's true. I was thinking a lot about groundedness. I did a meditation the other day and it talked about envisioning roots of a tree coming from your spine and connecting you to the earth.
It's my
And
favorite one.
yeah, that was a first for me. I'm branching out in my meditations. And to your point, the variety of trees, right? There's so many different ways to connect in and have that experience. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's timely for me too.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what you might want us to know about what you do professionally.
I do life coaching and I also coach people through the dying process and dying both physically and spiritually because it's in our lifetime that hopefully we die to the old ways of our own being, or we die to the ways that we were socially conditioned, or we die to the ways that society has pressured us to be. I tell people that I do life coaching and I do death doulaship, which I think confuses people, but I think they're both so intertwined and they're both so connected. It's been a long time coming. I've been training as a shamanic practitioner for the last 10 years, and I've been purpose coaching with folks for the last 6. And it's something that I feel really called to. And at first, it was really challenging to understand what and how do I integrate those parts of who I am into this life that I have as a corporate employee. And it took me a minute to get the hang of that. But integration of those aspects of who I am was possible in my corporate role. I spend a lot of time coaching and developing people around how to build bridges cross-culturally, how to be better and more whole for themselves and their teams in the workplace to build better workplaces. So that's really what I do. More recently, I've spent the last 6 to 8 months helping to build and launch inclusive leadership programs that are embedded across an entire employee ecosystem. It's about living in wholeness. I guess you could say I help corporations and people reach their fullest potential. And I have a specific passion for people, for working with clients one-on-one, for doing small group workshops, and I do retreats. If we can show up and be our whole selves, the world will be better as a result. Each of us has so much beauty to add to that soup, the soup of life. I want to help be a conduit for helping other people see what their own magic is.
That's so cool. There were so many things that you said. One of them that jumped out at me was the soup of life. I love that. And I had a guest a while back, Farrah Hudson Brown, and she talked about if she could have leaned more into who she was, her intuition, her full inner self, that she would have had the opportunity sooner to, she said, be the salt or add the flavor to the things that she was doing. Isn't that great?
I love
I
that.
love that. I think that's the thing, right? We each bring our own special, unique flavor to the soup of life. And that's the beauty of it, rather than get pigeonholed into some strange box, just fully embrace the special, unique thing that we have to add.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that you talked about intuition and how that person was exclaiming that they wish that they had been able to tap into their own sooner. It's a big part of the work that I love to do with people, is teaching them how to tap back into that, because we're taught how to ignore it, frankly, and we're taught how to be distracted from it. And we all want salt in our soup. Otherwise, it's super bland, you know?
Yes. Big salt fan. So tell us a little bit about something, a personal interest, or maybe something people don't know about you.
Couple things come to mind, but the first thing that jumped out at me is I'm an avid dancer. When I was 18, I took a competitive salsa class at San Jose State, and I did a little bit of competition salsa dancing. And from there, I was just hooked. And a couple of years ago, I was in the process of dueling my mom's death with her, and it was really important for me to come back to my body and process the grief that was being held in my body. And I did that by getting back onto the dance floor. And so I started taking lessons again, and I'm trained in Latin ballroom, and it's a big passion of mine. And if I could just not work full time and spend half of my time on the dance floor, I would absolutely do it. It's really, it's beautiful. It's like an art form. I'm never up here. I'm just in here. And any opportunity that I have to just be in my body, that lights me up and gives me so much creativity. And as long as I'm out of this thinking place, sometimes as an chronic overthinker and a chronic forgetter, which is a terrible mixture, right? It's so beautiful to just be in the intuitive felt sense of my body. And there's so much trust there. Yeah, dancing. I freaking love it. It's my favorite thing.
And I get that same feeling from playing guitar, which I started, I don't know, it's probably about 10 years ago that I really started taking it seriously. And when I say seriously, not that seriously, but really doing it. And I believe that's something you're playing with as well, right?
Yeah, I picked up the guitar a couple months ago, but more seriously, about a month ago, I started taking lessons, and everyone keeps telling me it won't make sense until it does. So just don't give up. And I'm at that point. I started learning Blackbird by the Beatles last night, and it's a beautiful song. And Paul McCartney has very interesting techniques when he strums the guitar. I was with my teacher and we were listening to it and trying to emulate the guitar strokes. And I was just, he's brilliant, but it's hard. It's hard to learn an instrument, especially as an adult.
Yes.
But I'm having so much fun with it.
Good. That's the thing. And when I stopped taking it too seriously and just having fun with it was when it started coming together. When we were speaking offline, you said, I'm no Eric Clapton. And I've always said a similar thing. I'm not going to rock any stadiums, nor is that my intention. I just love being able to be a part of the music. I love music so much, the way you describe dance, and just to be able to participate in it in that way and completely out of my head in those moments.
I love that you said that you get into it or enjoy it more when you're out of your head and you're just being more playful with it. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Not taking yourself too seriously is such a beautiful freedom to give yourself, though.
Now you hit my other favorite quote, which is also Oscar Wilde, which is life is too important to be taken seriously.
Amen. Amen.
All right. What are your pronouns?
My pronouns are they and them.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then your intersectionality, how you would describe who you are in this story of navigating your career as an outsider.
Yeah, the intersectionality piece is always so interesting to me because I'm notorious for trying to help people with what I call the great queering, aka rejecting norms that are placed on you by society and culture. Take this with a grain of salt, but I externally, if people need words to identify and help them understand who I am a little bit more, I'm a trans non-binary person who identifies as first generation college student. I'm white. My ancestors were prisoners of war during World War II, and that's a huge part of my upbringing. I was raised in a Russian cultural background and Russian Orthodox religion. A lot of that really deeply impacted my ways of navigating life as a kid. And I identify as a really deeply spiritual person. I know you've mentioned that, but my gender identity actually has a lot to do with my spirituality. So it's an interesting little soup being made over here, but we all have one.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
staying with that, you have such an interesting cross section of who you are. We all do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you could tell us a bit more about your formative years and how that all came together to start to really inform who you are.
Yeah. The other thing that I forgot to mention that's actually really important, and I frequently forget to mention it because it's something that I talk about in certain circles and not others, is that I'm in recovery from addiction, right? I'm part of a sober community, and I was raised in an environment where religion was a really important aspect of my upbringing. My family was very involved in the church, and there was also a lot of drinking. Russian culture is notorious for having basically vodka available all the time. If you look at their history, it makes sense. I won't go into it on this because we don't have time. It's part of the culture. As a kid, there was this cultural camp, summer camp, basically. And it was essentially a demilitarized cadet training camp that was brought to the United States from Russia. And it turns out that actually a lot of Slavic based cultures have a similar style of camp. The kids are basically taught how to survive in the wilderness. You're taught how to build structures out of wood. You're taught how to tie knots, how to build a fire and light it with one mat. And they make it really fun, right? There's a whole competitive edge to it. It's nature based and it's survival skills oriented ish. And there's a whole part of that environment where you're meant to learn religious history and historical context for the scouts and things like that. It's like scouting, but military style, more or less. That had a huge impact on me. I started going when I was 7 years old, and I started spending time away from my parents as a kid in the summer at that age. And then I stayed with it through being 18. But I think the main things that were deeply impactful for me were the religious aspect of my upbringing and how that really taught me what I wanted and didn't want from a spiritual container. And then my grandmother, who was a POW in World War II, was a huge part of my upbringing. There's that story or parable. It talks about how the boiling water will change the egg and the carrot, and then the coffee bean will change the water. Right? Under boiling water, a carrot becomes soft and an egg becomes hard, and the coffee bean will change the water. And my grandmother was not the carrot or the egg. She was the coffee bean. And I'm sure that there were aspects of her that were the egg and the carrot. We contain multitudes, right? Never binary, wink, wink. But for every intents and purpose, she should have been really hard after what she had been through. And she was the kindest, most loving, perhaps slightly avoidant person that I know. But growing up, I didn't see the avoidance. All I got was love. And having suffered from abuse as a kid, I was abused as a child. And after having gone through that, and she was just such a beacon and pillar of strength and love. And I always tell people that my grandma is why I know what love is. She was unconditional and joyful in her expression of it. And she always had my back, and feel a lot of gratitude for that.
That's really beautifully expressed. That's so remarkable about your grandmother because, as you said, you would think the most likely outcome would be to get hard. Do you have any sense of what led her to be able to be the coffee bean versus the egg?
She had this strength of constitution. And I think what helped her was staying grounded in her faith. And her faith looked different than my own, right? She believed so deeply that family and love and kindness and joy were more important than anything else. And she was gentle as a result. She was gentle in the way that she not just dealt with us, but the way that she moved through her life. I was still pretty young, but I spent summers with her growing up. My parents were going through a separation. They went through some tumultuous times. My dad was an alcoholic and they had their stuff. And I think the thing that saved my life as a kid, especially having gone through the abuse that I went through, is I spent summers with my grandmother. I just loved it. I looked forward to it. She was my safe place.
Soul nourishing.
Yeah. And it saved my life. To this day, it's having that, and I'm getting emotional because had it not been for that, I don't know where I would be. Yeah, she had this unwavering belief that kindness and joy and love were the things that were the most important. And she's right.
Yeah.
Come to find out, she just exuded that.
So beautiful. And I would imagine that it was that faith and kindness and love and joy that got her through her time in the POW camps and helped her emerge so whole.
Yeah, my grandmother and her brother were separated from the rest of their siblings and taken to an orphanage in Russia, basically. None of them were born in Russia. They were Yugoslavian. The Russians took the kids, as they do, and they took them to an orphanage in Russia. And my great-grandmother, Christina, tore the country apart to find them. She did not stop till she found her kids. There's some fierce love and dedication in that. And my grandmother had that too. And despite it all, she held on to that ferocity of love because she saw firsthand the power of that. She had a family again because her mom was like, I won't give up on you. And she found them. I remember my early 20s and things going awry in a lot of ways and reminding myself that if my Bobby can get through what she went through, I can get through this. I can get through this.
Yes. And what a legacy you've inherited and honored. All of that leads you to, in some way, this deep belief in the importance of trust with self. I know that from conversations that we've had. So help us thread from that experience into your work and belief in trust with self.
Yeah, I think from a young age, I alluded to, there was a lot of tumult in my home environment, right? My dad was a heavy drinker, and my mom, bless her heart, and she was a raging codependent in a lot of ways, as those circumstances sometimes force people to be. And so there was a lot of chaos, right? There was a lot of chaos in my home. I had a lot of pent up anger and confusion about myself, about who I was in the world. I would stand in church. I sang in the church choir, and I didn't really love going to church, but what I loved about the church was the smell of the incense and the ways that the smells and the colors and the sounds really calmed my heart. I suffered childhood trauma with abuse, and I was in this place where I was in high school, roaming around, trying to figure things out. But I always had this felt sense in my body. There's something deeper and more meaningful and more fulfilling to latch onto versus this chaos, which felt like noise. It felt like floating in a pool of water, right? Like it didn't feel substantive. This stuff didn't make sense to me. And I didn't really have words or ways to describe that back then. What I came to understand is that you can have your friends and your family, your chosen family, right? But if you don't have trust and faith in yourself, then you will have zero trust and faith in anyone else. And I learned that most viscerally, I think, because of the camp that I went to. You could earn badges by doing specific challenges. And there was one challenge in particular that was really challenging for me. And it was called Tripara, which means 3 feathers. And you had to spend a day not talking, a day not eating, and a day not being seen. And it was hard because I'm a freaking teenager.
Right.
You know, and going off into the wilderness by myself seemed an impossible task. But it helped me learn that I was capable and that the trust that I build with myself helps me in every other aspect of my life. It helps me trust others. It helps me have clarity. It helps me understand and believe my intuition in a world where I'm taught that I shouldn't or that I'm an imposter in some way, right? It's the thing that's helped me build the most strength and continuity in terms of owning and believing my intuition and myself and all the ways that I've committed and dedicated myself to building skills. I think trust in self is one of the most valuable things to cultivate. It's like going to the gym, the heart or soul gym.
Yeah, I actually do mental fitness work, and it's that same idea.
Yeah.
If you're going to lift physical weights, then lift mental weights, and let's work that muscle too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do mental fitness too. I didn't get into it until more recently. It was in the last couple of years, but it's exactly that. It's building those neural pathways and strengthening those mind muscles.
Yeah. The 2 things that I remember you talking to me about within self-trust and takeaways that you would have for people are baby stepping into small moments of fear and weaving in creation or creativity.
Yeah.
So feel free to riff on either and or both of those topics or choose a new one today and surprise me. But those are the ones I remember you talking about.
Baby steps are super critical, especially in our world today, right? Where we have the instant gratification of pushing a button and getting food delivered to our door, or we push a button and later that afternoon, someone in a truck comes and delivers the product. We have access to things at our fingertips with an almost instantaneous response. And I think we've built this muscle of thinking that we should have the same response, the big bursting moment of self-discovery, and then the rest is just smooth and easy. And the truth is that's completely false. Baby steps for me are not just for my nervous system. It's not just for my mind, but it's actually to build the muscle memory. Repetition, celebration of said baby steps, right? These build neural pathways. When you celebrate a small step for yourself, you're creating a dopamine experience for your body. So you're teaching your brain, you're teaching your body that that thing that you're doing is a good thing. The thing that's helped me the most over the course of my life is normalizing taking small incremental steps towards the things in my life that I want and that I dream about. And typically that includes doing shit that scares me, things that I'm nervous about. By cultivating that safety and that trust in the baby step, I'm teaching all the parts of me that want to tell me to be small, play it safe, protect myself from this perceived harm, teaching them that it's okay for them to trust me, my higher self, my dreams, my highest hope for myself in the world, right? And oftentimes what I do, especially when something scares me, is I will pause and I will say, this thing really makes me nervous, and I can tell because I'm sweating, or maybe my voice is slightly cracking, or maybe I can feel my heart rate slightly increase, but I'm not going to die from it. There's not a tiger chasing me, right? It's never been true in my life. As much time as I've spent in the wilderness, I have not once been chased by a cougar or been threatened to be eaten by a bear. I think we're taught instinctually to turn from moments that scare us. I learned through somatic therapy that when you actually lean into those sensations in a gently, in a self-gentle way, you're actually teaching your body and your parts and yourself and your mind that it's okay and that the thing that scares you isn't going to kill you. And then over time, these baby steps accumulate. And then all of a sudden you look back and you're, holy moly, I did that. I did all of that.
Right.
And that leads to trust. It leads to pride. It leads to self-love. And it's the hard moments that really help you to cultivate them more deeply than just, oh, I'm going to breeze through my life and not do anything that scares me. I find that has helped me build so much strength and so much resilience. And that has helped me have a lot of clarity in my workplace. It's helped me be able to stand in my strength as a leader. So there's so many benefits that I think are counterintuitive for folks, but it's helped me be a strong leader and to create positive change in not just my life, but the workplace.
Yeah. And if you could stay with that for a minute in terms of the workplace and helping you be the strong leader that you are, can you talk about that a little bit more specifically, how these baby steps have really helped you get to the place that you're at?
My path in the corporate sector, especially in the tech space, has not been super linear. I've taken pretty big risks in the name of exposing myself to different experiences and thus learning. My ability to take baby steps and build that trust with myself has allowed me to be really good at being able to identify and pinpoint gaps or opportunities in the workplace. And that's mostly from a people and operations perspective, because I've learned how to slow down enough to observe.
Hmm.
And that doesn't mean that I work slow, right? I work in tech for, you know,
Yeah.
and I've worked in companies that have been in their startup phase, and I've worked in companies that are a bit more mature, right? I've seen the whole spectrum. So it's helped me be able to slow down enough to be more observant. It's taught me how to have a really high level of emotional intelligence, which equates to not only being able to manage cross-functional stakeholders better, but to manage my team better. In some cases, it's given me the confidence to have conversations with executive level leaders in this role that I occupy now. Been with my company 8.5 years. I've supported 6 executives in that time. I've spent substantial time with the CEO. And there was one instance early on in my career at this company where I saw a gap in how we were operating. And I made the decision, because I built confidence and trust in myself and in my trust in my intuition. I decided that I was going to write a job description and pitch a role to an executive. And that was scary as hell. But I always thought to myself, this is just another baby step. And the worst that could happen is that she says, no, this is not the right time, or whatever. The worst, I still have a job. She's going to see the tenacity. There's something to be said about tenacity and having the courage to do something like that. I think she'll appreciate that. And she ended up saying, you know what, you're right. Let's write this JD and see what happens. And then that set me off on this trajectory of doing something that I feel purposeful in and taking the baby step again to living a life beyond my wildest dreams. And I can only do that if I take the next right baby step for me. I've lived through enough to know that no matter who you are, where you come from, we don't get a 5-year plan. The universe doesn't say, here you go, here's the manual for life.
Right.
Have fun and good luck out there, kid. None of us get that shit.
I've looked for it. I can't find it.
Right? Same. I've looked everywhere for it.
Yeah.
The only thing we get is the ability to make the next right decision. That requires trust. Otherwise, you get stuck in a loop of anxiety and controlling fear and all kinds of stuff. And so it's been a really powerful thing for me at work too, and having the courage to flex that muscle in the workplace, because sometimes it's easy for me to say, oh, I learned how to do this in personal or spiritual or I don't know, other matters that don't pertain to my workplace, but it's all intertwined. It's all connected. And that's been the biggest lesson for me is how can I allow this strength to be present in my working environment?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is what I'm hearing is that baby steps allow you to be more present, I believe.
100%.
I think in corporate and the things that we're told, and if you watch media, it's these big, bold moves, right? These big, dramatic things that people do. I don't know. Just think about it. Think about jumping out of a plane. If you're jumping out of a plane, it's really tough to see what's actually going on and to experience it. Or if you jump next to someone, chances are you're not having a big moment of connecting because you're both just free falling out of this plane. But when you can slow down and take a step, I always called it the better every day philosophy, which I used and use with my team, just better every day. Now you're in a space where you can, like you said, it's moving at a pace where you can notice the gaps, where you can stop and connect to the person next to you and build a meaningful relationship. And as you're doing this day after day, you're seeing the success. It's encouraging you to want to do it again. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a good way that, like you said, also you're building muscle memory, right? So now it's sustainable and now it's something that you can repeat. And then one day, like you said, you look back, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did all that. How did that happen? But does that all feel about right to you?
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that the connection piece is really important. It's what makes the richness of life rich. It's not being in a transactional place where you're not present. So yeah, that's super critical.
Something that you've talked about is creativity as well being important. And I don't know that we often associate creativity with the workplace. I see creativity in the creation of a job description.
Yeah.
How would you speak to the idea of bringing creativity into work?
Creativity becomes possible when you can trust yourself and be your whole self at work. Is it just painting a canvas and writing a poem? It's the energy of generating something new and unique. We all have creation energy. It's very innate to who we are as human beings. In a lot of aspects, that's not cultivated, right? Because it's not celebrated. But what I equate it to is risk taking. If you have the freedom and the space to trust yourself and be in an environment that is cultivating this ongoing dialogue and this feedback loop that's positive and not reprimanding, you have space to cultivate that creative energy. It means new ideas. It means writing job descriptions. It means thinking of a new way to solve a problem that your customers are facing. That creative flow leads to risk taking and it leads to psychological safety on your team, which generates even more ideation. And that results in better outcomes for not just products and stuff, but for teams, for the ways in which we're building and scaling. I can't say enough good things about the importance of creativity and being able to cultivate that. But you need that psychological safety and you need the ability to be your whole self. Without that, at least for me, what I find is that my creative propensity is blocked, essentially. If I don't feel safe to let those ideas flow, I'm not going to. And frankly, it hampers everybody.
Yeah, what opportunity is getting left at the door when that's the case? And it's back to the soup. Everyone's got their own flavor to add. And if that's being acknowledged and celebrated and encouraged, bring me more of that. It's a whole new game. I had one office that I ran that was one of the most rewarding professional experiences I had. And I intentionally, rather than transactional, focused on the culture and I involved the team in it. What's the culture we want to create? What do we want the office to look like? What do we want it to feel like? What do we want to stand for? Just really supporting each other. We were doing something that hadn't been done at this organization. So just the teamwork and recognizing each other's strengths and leaning on each other. And I always describe it as at some point, the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. There were these magical things that just started happening that I got chills when I just said it. Was like, wow, man, I didn't anticipate that in a good way. That was just amazing. Look at what just happened there. It was sharing ideas and volunteering ideas. It was really magical. And for me, that was one of my experiences with what I think you're talking about. It was a cool soup.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, I got a hit of energy from you saying that because it's true. It doesn't mean that what we have to offer is less than, it's that we're better when we're creative together. And it's also about the stories we tell ourselves, right? And this goes back to the self-trust building and the baby steps, right? If you have a narrative in your brain that you are not a creative being, I have news for you. That's a story. That's a story. And that story isn't true. It's about finding ways to counter that story. I used to tell myself that I wasn't an artist. And so I started looking for opportunities to prove myself wrong, to counter that story. And I found so many ways to do it. And now I'm totally owning the artist label because we are all artists, and how that is expressed through us is different for every person. My challenge to folks is create the safety for you within you to let these things that are inherent to who you are as a human being really flow through. And man, you will see the magic happen right in front of your eyes and you'll be astounded.
Love it. Love that. Thank you for sharing all of that wisdom. And speaking of creativity, I'm going to pivot to the segment of the podcast that I call It's My Podcast, so there will be music. I will ask you what I ask all guests, which is if there were one song you could put in a time capsule and preserve at all costs for future generations, what would it be and why?
It's Alanis Morissette's Thank You.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just such an ode to personal strength. I don't know the whole story behind the song, but all I know is when I sing it and when I've sung it throughout the course of my life, it reminds me to say thank you to all the things that have come up, because even in the perceived bad or wrong, I've always learned something and I've always been able to create opportunity from this thing. And so thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, I love Alanis Morissette, so can't go wrong there.
Oh, totally. I will never forget where I was when I heard her for the first time. It was Jagged Little Pill when it was first released. I was driving around. I was in sales. I was driving around Queens. I pulled over to the side of the road because I didn't know what had just happened. She's amazing in that song. Thanks everything, including terror. You said lean into the fear. It's such a great song. Also, how about me enjoying the moment for once? That's one of her lines. And it's just being present again. So yeah, beautiful song. I'm thrilled to add it to our Spotify playlist. So thank you for that. Yay.
You're so welcome. I'm so glad. I'm a sucker for a good Spotify playlist. Yeah, it's perfect.
Check it out in the show notes. You can see what's already up there too.
Amazing. Thank you.
All right. So as we're coming around here, tell us where you would like people to find you.
Yeah. So right now, my website's under construction. Stay tuned, I suppose, for that. I'll be announcing its launch through all my social channels. I do frequent Instagram. I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm on TikTok. And I'm new to Substack, which I'm feeling really excited about. But in most cases, you can find me at the handle The Great Queering, or you can search my first and last name and you should be able to find me. And if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or workshops or anything like that, I can share my email address and folks can reach out directly as well. I feel really passionate about being supportive to folks on their journey. And in lieu of my website not yet being launched, that's always a consistent way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure we share all of the links, including your email address, so that people can find you. I'm just so happy to have had this extra time with you today.
Yeah.
I take so much away from our conversations. I appreciate all of what you shared, both about your formative years all the way through to the amazing things that you've done in your career. So thank you for showing up and showing up fully and practicing what you preach.
Yeah, same, right back at you. And I love that there's spaces like this for people to tell the stories that we don't often get to tell. And I love a campfire style storytelling experience and opportunity because it just feels so close to the heart. And so thanks for creating the safe space to that. Being a new friend in my repertoire. I'm so excited.
Oh, yay. I love that. That's a perfect way to end this. All right. So, everyone, that brings this episode of Stories We Haven't Shared to a close. I believe stories are our humanity waiting to be shared, and listening makes it possible. Thanks so much for being here by our virtual campfire today. And thank you so much again to Indigo. Appreciate you.